she found a man, tied to a towering oak tree, in the heart of the storm. Blood trickled from his wounds, mingling with the rain that fell without mercy. Dark, emerald scales gleamed on his face beneath the flashes of lightning, and as she reached out to help him, he snarled, "Run! Get away! Before they come back! To finish me off!" Emily Carter was 26 years old, and she had just lost everything. 2 hours earlier, her manager at the diner had fired her, not for incompetence and not for tardiness, but because she refused to smile at a customer who'd thought it was okay to slide his hand up her thigh while she was serving him dinner when she complained. The manager had laughed. "You should be flattered," he'd said. "Guys like that leave generous tips." Emily didn't feel flattered. She felt disgusted. And when the customer tried it again, she dumped a steaming cup of coffee right in his lap. It was satisfying, for exactly 3 seconds, until the manager dragged her into the back, screaming that she was fired, that she'd never get another job in any diner in the city, that she was an ungrateful BOQ who didn't know her place. If you've ever felt like the world just doesn't care about you, that no matter how hard you try to do the right thing, you always end up losing, then you'll understand what Emily felt in that moment. She didn't cry. She'd stopped crying when she was 16, when her grandma died in her arms after a long illness. Since then, Emily had learned that tears didn't change a thing, only action did. So she grabbed her backpack with her meager belongings, a photo of her grandma, a few changes of clothes, an herbal remedy guide that the old woman had given her, and she walked out of the diner. The storm started 10 minutes later. It wasn't just ordinary rain. It was the kind of storm that felt personal, like the sky itself was angry. Lightning split the darkness every few seconds. The wind howled through the trees like a wounded animal, and Emily. Emily was right in the middle of it all. No umbrella, no money for a cab, no one to call. She could have gone to the bus station, waited for the storm to pass. She could have sought shelter in a store. But something was pushing her forward, a strange feeling in her chest that she couldn't explain. The shortest way to her apartment was through Central Park, at night. No one went through there. It was dangerous. Everyone knew it. But Emily wasn't afraid of the dark. She was afraid of things much more real, like not being able to pay her rent, like running out of food, like discovering that at 26 years old she still hadn't found her place in the world. The Ramble, in the center of the park, was ancient. Some of the oak trees were over 200 years old. Emily's grandma used to say that place had energy, that ancient creatures dwelled in the shadows between the twisted trunks. Emily had always thought they were just stories, until tonight. The lightning illuminated the clearing first, and that's when she saw him. A man tied to a towering oak tree, obsidian black cords wrapped around his body from chest to ankles. His head hung forward, wet black hair obscuring his face. Blood. So much blood. Streamed from wounds on his torso, staining what was left of a suit that probably cost more than Emily made in a year. She should have run. Anyone in their right mind would have run. But Emily took a step forward, and another, and another. The smell of blood mixed with rain filled her nostrils. The wind howled around them, as if it were trying to warn her of something. Every instinct in her body screamed at her to get away. But Emily's instincts never worked like normal people's. She knelt in the mud, reached out, touched the man's face, and that's when she saw it. Scales. Small emerald scales gleamed along his jawline. They crept up his temples, disappearing into his hair. And when another bolt of lightning flashed across the sky, Emily saw small horns, dark, almost invisible. Partially hidden among the black strands. She should have screamed, she should have run, she should have done anything except what she did. Emily cupped his face in her hands and lifted his head. His eyes opened, amber and green, with pupils that were vertical, like those of a predator, like those of something that wasn't entirely human. "Run," he whispered. His voice was deep, hoarse with pain. "Before they come back to finish me off, who did this to you?" Emily asked. His eyes widened slightly, as if he hadn't expected her to still be there, as if he hadn't expected anyone, to stop and help. "It doesn't matter," he said. "You need to go, now. If they find you here—" Emily looked at the cords that bound him. They were strange. Black as night, with silvery symbols that glowed faintly even in the torrential rain. She tried to pull one. The man groaned in pain. "Iron black cords," he gasped through clenched teeth. "Made to bind. My kind." "Your kind," Emily repeated. Another flash of lightning, and this time she saw his hand. The right one was normal, human, pale and strong, but the left one was covered in dark emerald scales. The fingers ended in black claws. It was the hand of a nightmarish creature, or of a fairy tale. "You're—" Emily started. "Go away," he interrupted. "I'm not your problem." Emily should have agreed, should have gotten up and left, but something in his voice, something in his eyes, made her stop. It wasn't just physical pain that she saw there. It was something deeper, more ancient. It was the pain of someone who had given up on being saved. Emily knew that look. She saw it in the mirror every day. "I'm not leaving you here to die," she said. The man closed his eyes. "You don't know what I am," he murmured. "If you did, you wouldn't say that." "I don't care what you are," Emily replied. "I care about what's right, and leaving someone bleeding to death tied to a tree is not right." She opened her backpack. Her hands trembled, but not from fear, from determination. Her grandma's herbal remedy guide was soaked, but she knew those pages by heart. Willow bark for pain, yarrow to stop bleeding, comfrey root for wounds. The ramble was full of these plants. Emily had spent her childhood learning to identify them. Her grandma had said that knowledge would save lives one day. Emily never imagined it would be like this. She stood up and started searching. The rain made it hard to see, but her fingers found what she needed. Leaves, roots, bark. Everything her grandma had taught her. When she returned, the man was watching her. "What do you think you're doing?" he asked. "Saving your life," Emily replied. "Now be quiet." She worked quickly, tearing strips from her own clothes to make makeshift bandages, chewing some leaves into a paste and applying it to the deepest wounds. Grandma would have been proud. The man said nothing, just watched her with those impossible eyes. Amber and green. Too ancient for such a young face, filled with something Emily couldn't identify. "Why are you doing this?" he finally asked. "You don't even know me." Emily paused, looked at him. "Because once," she said slowly, "when I needed help, nobody came, and I swore I would never be that kind of person." His eyes shifted. Something in them softened. Just for a second, so fast Emily almost missed it, and that's when she heard it. Footsteps. Not one pair. 3. Maybe 4. Coming through the ramble. Flashlights bobbing between the trees, despite the storm. The man's body tensed. "They're back," he whispered. "You need to hide." Emily didn't move. "They'll kill you," she said. "Probably," he replied. "But if they find you here, they'll kill you too, and I'm not going to have another death on my conscience." He paused. Emily looked around. The clearing was too open. Nowhere to hide. The footsteps were getting closer. The voices too. "He can't have gotten far," someone said. "Keep searching." "Found blood," another voice. "The trail leads this way." Emily made a decision in less than a second. She stood up, covered the man with leaves and branches. As best she could, the rain helped, washing away some of the blood, darkening the scene. "What are you doing, he hissed. "Stay quiet," she replied, "and don't move." Then she walked directly towards the flashlights. The men stopped when they saw her. There were 3 of them, big, dressed in black, with eyes that glowed unnaturally in the darkness. One of them had a scar that ran from his eye to his chin. Another carried a sword that looked like it was made from the same obsidian black material as the cords. "What have we here?" the scarred one said. "A human. Lost in the ramble." Emily put on her best scared girl act when it wasn't hard. Part of her was genuinely terrified. "Please," she said in a trembling voice. "Please, help me. I saw an injured man running towards the river. He looked like he was dying." The three exchanged glances. "A man?" the biggest one said. "What did he look like?" "Tall," Emily replied. "Dark hair, blood everywhere. He ran that way." She pointed to the opposite side of the clearing, towards the river. For one terrible moment, she thought they hadn't bought it. The scarred one studied her with narrowed eyes. "She's just a pathetic human," the third one said. "Come on, before he gets away for good." The three brushed past her, without looking back. Emily waited until the sound of their footsteps faded into the storm. Waited another 5 minutes, just to be sure. Then she ran back to the clearing. The man was still there, still tied up. But his eyes looked at her, differently now. "You lied to them," he said. It wasn't a question. "You risked your life," he continued, "for a stranger." Emily started to remove the leaves she'd piled on him. "You can thank me after I get you out of these cords," she said. The man almost smiled. "You won't be able to," he said. "They're black iron cords. Only—" Emily pulled Grandma's herbal remedy guide from her backpack, flipped through the soaked pages until she found what she was looking for. A chapter on ancient materials, about how certain herbs could weaken even the most powerful enchantments. Grandma knew things nobody else did. "Let me try," Emily said. She worked for almost an hour. The rain didn't let up. The cold seeped into her bones. But Emily didn't stop, applied mixtures to the cords, hummed words Grandma had taught her as a child, words she thought were just lullabies. The cords began to weaken. "How?" the man whispered. "That's impossible." "My grandma," Emily replied as she worked. "She always said there were things in this world that most people don't understand. She taught me to respect those things." The last cord snapped. The man fell forward. Emily caught him before he hit the mud. He was heavier than he looked. Warmer, too, despite all the blood he'd lost. "Can't walk," he said. "Leave me here." "No way," Emily replied. "I know a place. An abandoned barn. Not too far. You can rest there until you get your strength back." "Why are you doing this?" he asked again. Emily helped him to his feet, put his arm over her shoulders, the arm with the dragon hand. The scales were surprisingly warm against her skin, because, Gilmore, she said as they started to walk, "When I look at you, I don't see a monster. I see someone who's been abandoned by everyone, and I know exactly how that feels." The man didn't reply, but something in his silence said more than any word could. And as they walked through the storm, Emily had no idea that she had just changed the destiny of an entire kingdom, or that the men she tricked weren't men at all, or that the injured stranger she was carrying was the most powerful being that ever existed, the Dragon King. And she had less than 6 hours to save him, before the assassins discovered the truth. The barn was exactly as Emily remembered, abandoned for at least a decade, rotting wooden walls that still managed to keep most of the rain out, a roof with enough holes to let in the light of the lightning, but closed off enough to provide shelter. Emily used to come here when she was a kid, when she needed to escape from a world that never seemed to have a place for her. She lowered the man onto a pile of old hay. He groaned softly, but didn't complain. Seemed like the kind of person who didn't complain about anything, who would rather suffer in silence than show weakness. Emily knew that kind, was one of them. "You've lost a lot of blood," she said, as she examined his wounds in the light of a lightning flash. "I did what I could in the ramble, but you need real medical attention." "No," he said. His voice was weaker now. "No hospitals. If those wounds get infected, my body heals itself," he interrupted. "Unlike humans. I just need time." Emily looked at him. The rain had washed some of the blood from his face, revealing more of the scales that spread across his skin. They glowed even in the darkness, deep green, like ancient emeralds, beautiful in a way Emily hadn't anticipated. "You should be afraid of me," he stated. "Why?" Emily asked. "Because I'm a dragon." He delivered the line as if stating the sky was blue, a simple, undeniable fact. Emily paused, considering his words. "My grandma used to tell me stories," she began slowly, "about dragons who lived among humans, rulers of a hidden kingdom that existed in the shadows of our own. I always just assumed they were fairy tales." "They aren't," he responded, "and most of my kind wouldn't have hesitated to kill you for seeing too much. But you're not going to kill me," Emily said. It wasn't a question. His eyes met hers, amber and green, shimmering in the dim light. "No," he said after a long pause. "I won't." "Why?" He looked away, a flicker of something unreadable crossing his face. "Because you could have left," he said. "You could have left me to die. You could have turned me over to those assassins, but you didn't do any of those things. You—" He paused, as if the next words were physically painful for him to say. "You saved me, asking for nothing in return." "It's just what decent people do," Emily countered. "Not," he said. "Not where I come from. In my world, everyone wants something. Everyone has a price. Everyone is willing to betray for power. Or gold." "Sounds like a horrible place," Emily commented. "It is," he agreed. "And I am its ruler." Emily felt the air leave her lungs. Ruler. "You don't know who I am," he said. "You really don't know." "You're someone who almost died tonight," Emily retorted. "That's all that matters right now." He studied her for a long moment, his gaze intense. "My name," he said finally, "is Kale Blackthorn, and I am the Dragon King." Emily was silent. The Dragon King. Even people who didn't believe in legends knew that title. It was whispered in ancient stories, painted on murals in long-forgotten civilizations. The ruler of all dragons. The most powerful being ever to walk the earth. And he was lying in a run-down barn, bleeding onto moldy hay, after she dragged him through a storm. "You're shocked," he observed, a hint of amusement in his voice. Emily swallowed, trying to process what she was hearing. "A little," she admitted, "but it doesn't change what I said. You still need care." She resumed her task, cleaning the wounds that continued to weep, applying more of the herbs she'd gathered. His body reacted differently than a human's. She noticed, stronger, hotter, already beginning to heal in ways that seemed impossible. "How did you end up tied to a tree?" she asked as she worked. Kyle closed his eyes. "Betrayal," he said. The word was bitter on his tongue. "Someone close to me, someone I trusted, poisoned my drink at dinner. When I woke up, I was in that part of the ramble, bound, surrounded by assassins. Do you know who it was?" "I have my suspicions," he replied. "But suspicions aren't proof. And in my world, accusing someone powerful without proof is asking to die." Emily thought of the cords, the unnatural substance that had bound him so tightly. "That black material," she said. "You said it was made to restrain your kind." "Valkrath black iron," Kyle confirmed. "Only the royal family has access to that material, which means whoever betrayed me. There's someone very close to the throne, someone who wants the throne for themselves, Emily finished. Kyle opened his eyes, his gaze sharp. "You're quick," he said. "Most humans wouldn't understand so fast." Emily shrugged, trying to dismiss his compliment. "I read a lot," she said, "and political dramas are the same everywhere. Someone always wants power. Someone is always willing to kill for it. You speak as if you know from experience." "I used to be a waitress at that diner," Emily responded. "You learn a lot about human nature serving tables. Who treats others well, who only cares about themselves, who smiles while plotting to destroy someone." Kyle was silent for a moment, absorbing her words. "Why were you in the ramble tonight?" he asked, "and alone, in the storm?" Emily hesitated, remembering the anger and humiliation she'd felt earlier. "I was fired," she said finally. "For refusing to put up with a customer's harassment." Kyle's eyes narrowed, a dangerous glint appearing in their depths. "Harassment. A man put his hand on me," Emily explained. "I spilled hot coffee in the lap of him. My manager fired me for it." Something flickered across Kyle's face. Something dark. Something dangerous. "What was the name of the diner?" he asked, his voice low and menacing. Emily almost laughed, despite the tension in the air. "What are you going to do?" she said. "Burn it to the ground." Kyle didn't answer. He just stared at her. It was answer enough. "You don't need to do anything," Emily said. "I can take care of myself." "I know you can," Kyle responded, his gaze unwavering. "That's why I want to help. People who take care of themselves rarely receive help when they need it." Emily didn't know what to say. No one had ever spoken to her like that before, so no one had ever seen her that way. She continued working in silence, trying to ignore the warmth that was spreading through her cheeks. Kyle's wounds were closing faster now. The skin around his scales regenerated in incredible ways. But he was still weak. He had still lost too much blood. "You need to rest, she said. "I'll keep watch." "You don't have to do that." "I know," Emily responded. "But I'm going to anyway." She sat down against the wall of the barn. The storm still raged outside, but it seemed distant now, less real than the man, the dragon, lying just a few feet from her. Kyle watched her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "You're strange," he said finally, a slight smile playing on his lips. "Thank you," Emily responded, a touch of sarcasm in her voice. "It was a compliment," he clarified. "I know," she said. "Good night, Majesty." Kyle closed his eyes. "Kyle," he murmured. "Call me Kyle." "Good night, Keel." Silence stretched between them, comfortable, unexpected. Emily hadn't planned to sleep. She'd planned to stay awake all night, watching over him. But her eyes were heavy, her body exhausted, and at some point, without realizing it, she drifted off to sleep, and as she slept, she dreamed of dragons. The sound came from the depths of a dreamless sleep. "No, please, no." Emily woke with a jolt, her heart pounding in her chest. The storm had subsided. The faint light of dawn filtered through the holes in the roof. And Kyle. Kyle was having a nightmare. His body thrashed on the hay. Sweat glistened on his forehead. The scales on his face pulsed with a strange, almost feverish light. "Sophie," he murmured, his voice laced with pain. "Sophie, no. I'll find you. I promise." Emily reached out, hesitantly. She placed her hand on his shoulder. "Kyle," she said softly. "Kyle, wake up. It's just a dream." His eyes snapped open. For a second. He didn't seem to recognize her. His eyes were wild, frightened. His draconic hand clamped down on her wrist with enough force to hurt. Then, clarity returned. The pressure eased. He started, his voice ragged. "It's okay," Emily reassured him. "It's all right. It was just a nightmare." Kyle released her wrist. He stared at his own hand, the one covered in scales, as if it belonged to someone else entirely. "I hurt you," he stated, a hint of regret lacing his tone. "No," Emily replied softly. "I saw your face," he interrupted, his voice heavy with guilt. "I saw the pain." Emily glanced down at her wrist. There were marks. Red and angry. "They'd probably be bruised by morning." "It's nothing," she said, trying to downplay it. "It's everything," Kyle countered. He sat up, moving away from her. That's why I shouldn't." He trailed off, his words hanging in the air. "You should leave." "Who's Sophie?" Emily asked instead of answering, her curiosity piqued. Kyle froze, as if struck by an invisible blow. "What did you say?" "You were calling out for her in the dream," Emily explained, watching him carefully. "Sophie. You said you were going to find her." The silence that followed was different, heavier, laden with something Emily couldn't quite identify, a deep-seated sorrow, perhaps. "Sophie," Kyle finally said, his voice barely a whisper, "is my daughter." Emily hadn't expected that. It was a revelation that caught her completely off guard. "Your daughter. She's 6 years old now." Kyle continued, his voice changing, becoming softer, more vulnerable. "If she's even still alive." "What happened to her?" Emily inquired, her voice laced with concern. Kyle ran a hand over his face. The human hand, as if trying to erase the memories etched there. "Her mother was murdered," he said, his voice strained. 2 years ago. An attack during an official visit. I was in another wing of the palace. By the time I got there..." He paused, the pain evident in his eyes. "By the time I got there, it was too late. Her mother was dead, and Sophie had vanished." "The assassins took her?" Emily questioned, a shiver running down her spine. "I don't know," Kyle replied, his voice filled with anguish. "I searched everywhere. I used every resource of the kingdom, but Sophie simply disappeared, as if she never existed." Emily felt her heart clench. A wave of empathy washed over her. "You think she's still alive?" she asked gently. Kyle looked up at the barn's ceiling, at the holes that offered a glimpse of the sky, now beginning to lighten with the dawn. "I feel it," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "There's a connection between a dragon father and his offspring. Faint, distant, but it still exists. So yet, I believe she's alive, somewhere." Emily thought of her grandma, of the pain of losing someone you love, of the impossible hope that somehow you'll see them again. "You'll find her," she said with conviction. Kyle looked at her, his gaze intense. "You can't know that," he pointed out, a hint of skepticism in his voice. "No," Emily agreed, "but I believe it. And sometimes believing is the first step." Something flickered across Kyle's face, something he probably didn't show to anyone. Vulnerability, gratitude, and maybe, just maybe, a flicker of hope. "You're strange," he said again, a hint of amusement in his tone. "You already said that." Emily replied, a small smile playing on her lips. "It's still true," Kyle insisted, his eyes twinkling. Emily chuckled softly. "How are you feeling?" she asked, changing the subject. "The injuries?" "Better," Kyle responded, his voice regaining some strength. "Still weak, but better. Your herbs worked in ways that even the healers of my kingdom can't manage." "My grandma," Emily said, a hint of pride in her voice. "She spent her life studying plants. She always said that nature has cures for everything. We just need to know where to look." "She sounds like she was a wise woman," Kyle commented, his voice filled with respect. She was. Emily agreed, her voice softening. She raised me after my parents died, taught me everything I know. And she, Kyle prompted gently, died 10 years ago. Emily finished, her voice tinged with sadness. In my arms. Kyle was silent for a moment, absorbing the information. I'm sorry, he said after a pause, his voice sincere. Don't be, Emily responded. She lived a good life, and she left me something more valuable than any treasure. What? Kyle asked, his curiosity piqued. The ability to help others, Emily said, her voice clear and strong. To make a difference, even if I'm just a waitress with nothing. Kyle studied her intently, his gaze unwavering. You're not just nothing, he said, his voice low and earnest. You're more than anyone I've ever met. Emily felt her face flush. You're delirious, she said, trying to brush off his compliment. It's probably the fever. I don't have a fever, Kyle countered, his voice firm. Then it's the blood loss, Emily insisted, trying to deflect his gaze. Emily! Kyle started, his voice soft yet insistent. She looked at him, meeting his gaze. Kale's eyes were intense, amber and green gleaming in the faint dawn light. And there was something in them, something that made her heart race in a way it hadn't in years. Thank you, he said, his voice filled with emotion. It was a simple word. But coming from him, coming from the Dragon King, it seemed to mean everything. Emily looked away, suddenly feeling flustered. You can thank me when all this is over, she said, trying to regain her composure. When you're safe. When you find your daughter. Kyle didn't respond verbally, but his eyes didn't leave her. They held a silent intensity that spoke volumes. And that's when something slipped from the inner pocket of his torn coat. A small object, metallic, gleaming faintly in the morning light. Emily bent down to pick it up. It was a medallion, round, golden, with a symbol engraved on it that she recognized from history books. A dragon coiled around a crown, the royal family crest, the final proof of who he really was. Emily held the medallion with trembling hands. She knew that symbol. The whole kingdom knew it. And now, holding the proof in her hands, she understood the real weight of what she'd done. She hadn't just saved an injured man. She'd saved the Dragon King, and the assassins she'd outsmarted. Wouldn't stop until they finished the job. Kyle, she said slowly, her mind racing. Who else knew about the diner yesterday? Who else had access to your drink? Kyle glanced at the medallion in her hands, his expression darkening. Only my closest advisors, he responded, his voice laced with suspicion. And, among them, he paused, his eyes narrowing. What are you thinking? Emily opened the medallion. Inside, there was a small picture. A little girl, dark hair, eyes that were a mixture of amber and green. Sophie. This picture, Emily said, her voice barely a whisper. It's recent. It's 2 years old, Kyle replied, his voice strained. Tense. Why do you ask? Because I know this face, Emily said slowly, the realization hitting her like a physical blow. I've seen this girl before. Emily's words hung in the air like an impossible promise. I've seen this girl before. Kyle sat up abruptly, ignoring the pain from his injuries. His eyes, those amber and green eyes, blazed with an intensity that made Emily's heart pound. Where? He demanded, his voice changing. It was no longer the vulnerable man from minutes ago. It was the Dragon King. Where did you see my daughter? Emily felt a weight settle on her shoulders, the responsibility of bringing hope to someone who probably didn't dare to hope anymore. There's an orphanage, she said slowly, on the east side of the city, home for lost children. I used to go there when I worked at a restaurant nearby. I'd take leftover food. The kids didn't have much, and I liked to help. Go on, Kyle urged, his voice tight with anticipation. There was a little girl there, Emily continued, her voice gaining strength. She arrived about 2 years ago. No one knew where she came from. Showed up on the orphanage doorstep in the middle of the night, alone, covered in blood. She didn't speak, didn't make a sound. The staff said she was mute. Sophie wasn't mute, Kyle said, his voice strained. I know, Emily replied, because once, just once, I heard her speak. It was when another boy was bullying her. She whispered something, so low I almost didn't hear it. She said, Daddy's coming. Kyle closed his eyes, his face etched with a mixture of pain and hope. Something flickered in them before they closed, something that might have been a tear, if dragons could cry. What was she like? He asked, his voice almost a whisper now. Dark hair, Emily said. Eyes that weren't just one color. And she had a bracelet. Gold, with the same symbol as this medallion. Kyle's body went completely still. My mother's bracelet, he said. Sophie's worn it since she was a baby. It matched one that my mother had. Emily felt her heart race. Kyle, she said, if Sophie's at that orphanage, I need to go, he interrupted. Now. He tried to stand. Almost made it, but his body gave out, and Emily had to catch him before he fell. You can barely stand, she said. Your wounds haven't completely healed yet. If you go like this. I don't care, he said. My daughter's miles away, alive, and I'm going to her, even if I have to crawl. Emily looked at him. She saw the desperate father, behind the powerful king. She saw 2 years of searching, of lost hope, of sleepless nights. She saw someone who would move mountains for his daughter, and she made a decision. I'll go, she said. What? I'll go to the orphanage, Emily explained. You stay here. Get your strength back. Meanwhile, I'll confirm if it's really Sophie. And if it is, I'll bring her to you. Kale studied her. Why would you do that? He asked. You've already done so much. Because I know what it's like, Emily replied, to lose the only family you have. And if there's a chance you can get yours back, I'm going to do everything I can to make it happen. Something changed in Kale's face. Something softened. He reached out. His human hand. She hasn't touched Emily's face. The touch was gentle, almost reverent. You are the most extraordinary person I've ever met, he said. Emily felt her face flush. You're delirious again. I'm not, he replied. And Emily. He paused. When this is over, when my daughter is safe, I'm going to find a way to thank you. Really thank you. Emily didn't know what to say, so she just nodded, grabbed her backpack and prepared to leave. But before she could take a step, the barn door banged open, and there they were. 3 figures, dressed in black, with eyes that gleamed in the morning light. The same trio that Emily had tricked the night before, and behind them, a 4th man. This one was different, older. Grey hair, impeccably styled. A smile that didn't reach his eyes, dressed like a nobleman, with a cloak embroidered in silver. Well, well, he said. The voice was smooth as poison. It seems our little problem wasn't quite as resolved as I thought. Kyle stepped in front of Emily, even wounded, even barely able to stand. He shielded her with his own body. Victor, he said. The older man smiled wider. Your Majesty, he replied. The word was a mockery. You seem, well, less imposing than usual. The venom did its work, I see. You, Emily began. Ah, the human. Victor interrupted her. The assassins told me about you. The plucky waitress who lied to save him. How sweet, how pathetic. He gestured to the 3 men. Kill her, he said casually. But do it slowly. I want him to watch. Emily felt her blood run cold. "No!" Kyle growled. His voice had changed. Deeper, more dangerous. "If you touch her, what are you going to do, Your Majesty?" Victor scoffed. "You can barely stand. Your power is depleted. You're pathetic." The three assassins advanced. Emily looked around, searching for an exit, a weapon, anything. And that's when she saw it. Her grandma's herbal remedy guide had fallen out of her backpack the night before, open to a page she hadn't noticed before, a page about protective herbs, and in the corner, a note in her grandma's handwriting, for emergencies. Mix with fire. Emily acted on instinct. She grabbed the herbs she still had in her pocket, tossed them on the ground, and before anyone could react, she lit the match she always carried. The explosion wasn't big, but the smoke was dense, dark, suffocating. The assassins recoiled, coughing. Victor shouted something unintelligible, and Emily grabbed Kyle's arm. "Run," she said. They ran, or rather, Emily ran, dragging Kyle with her. He was still too weak to move quickly, but the adrenaline helped. The smoke helped. And maybe, just maybe, the will to live helped too. They plunged into the ramble. Behind them, shouts of fury echoed. "Find them!" Victor's voice cut through the air. "Find them, and bring me the human's head." Emily didn't look back. She just ran, and ran, and ran. For how long? She didn't know. Minutes that felt like hours. The shouts faded into the distance. The ramble grew denser. Finally, when she couldn't take it anymore, she stopped. They were in a part of the ramble that Emily didn't recognize. Older. Darker. The trees here were gigantic, ancients that had seen empires rise and fall. Kyle leaned against one of them. His breathing was ragged. Fresh blood stained the bandages that Emily had made. "You're bleeding again," she said. "Doesn't matter," he replied. "You saved us." Again. Emily sat down on the damp earth. Her legs trembled. Her hands trembled. Everything trembled. "Victor," she said. "He's the traitor." "My oldest advisor," Kyle confirmed. "He's been by my side for 20 years, since before I became king. And he tried to kill you." "He wants the throne," Kyle said. "He's always wanted it. But the laws of our kind don't allow a non-royal blood to rule. The only way for Victor to become king would be if you and your daughter were dead," Emily finished. Kyle nodded. "He must have orchestrated the attack that killed my wife," he said. His voice was full of a cold fury. "He must have hidden Sophie somewhere, and now he's trying to finish the job," Emily said. "Yes." Silence stretched between them. Emily thought about the orphanage, about Sophie, about the mute little girl who had been waiting for 2 years for the father who promised to come. "He knows about Sophie?" she asked suddenly. Kyle looked at her. "What do you mean?" "Victor," Emily explained. "If he was the one who hid Sophie, he knows where she is. If he's trying to kill you now, after 2 years, something must have changed. Something must have made him accelerate his plans." Kyle was silent for a moment. Then his eyes widened. "Sophie is growing," he said slowly. "Soon, she'll start manifesting her dragon powers. And when that happens, there will be no hiding who she is. Victor needs to kill you before that happens," Emily continued. "Because if Sophie manifests powers, she'll become the rightful heir," Kyle finished. "And even if Victor killed me, he couldn't touch her without starting a full-blown civil war." Emily stood up, her mind already racing. "Then we need to get to Sophie first," she stated, her voice firm. "Emily," Kyle began, concern etched on his face. "Listen," she interrupted, cutting him off. "You said Victor is powerful, that without proof you can't accuse him. But what if we had proof? What if we found something linking him to Sophie's abduction? Something concrete?" Kyle studied her, his expression shifting. "What are you thinking?" he asked, intrigued. Victor must have left a trail, Emily insisted. No one hides a child for 2 years without making mistakes, without someone noticing something. If Sophie's at that orphanage, someone brought her there. Someone paid for her upkeep. Someone might have left documents, Kyle completed, his eyes widening. Hope flickered in them. And something else too. Respect. I'm going to the orphanage, Emily declared. I'll confirm it's Sophie, and I'll look for any clue about who left her there. Any leads. It's too dangerous, Kyle countered, his voice laced with worry. Victor will be looking for you. Victor is looking for both of us, Emily argued, her tone unwavering. If I go alone, I can blend in and disappear. I'm just a human, remember? Invisible. Unimportant. You're not unimportant, Kyle said, his voice low and intense. To the world. I am, Emily replied, a hint of sadness in her eyes. And right now that's an advantage, a huge advantage. Kyle moved closer to her, closing the gap between them. His hand, his dragon hand, touched Emily's face. The scales were warm, surprisingly gentle. If anything happens to you, he said, his voice thick with emotion. It won't, she replied, her gaze locking with his. How can you be sure? Kyle asked, doubt clouding his features. Because your daughter is waiting, Emily answered, her voice soft but resolute. And I'm not leaving her waiting any longer. Kale's eyes met hers, amber and green, swirling with unspoken emotion, intense, burning with a fire she couldn't ignore, filled with something Emily didn't dare name, didn't dare hope for. Emily, he said, his voice barely a whisper. Yes, she breathed, her heart pounding in her chest. He didn't reply with words. Instead, he leaned in, and for the first time, very lightly, his lips touched her forehead. It was a kiss of gratitude, a silent thank you, of protection, a promise to keep her safe, of something that maybe, just maybe, was the beginning of something more, something she had only dreamed of. Come back to me, he whispered, his breath warm against her skin. Emily closed her eyes, savoring the moment. I will come back, she said, her voice filled with determination, with your daughter. Then she turned and walked towards the city, towards the unknown, without looking back. Because if she did, if she dared to look back, she might not be able to leave. The pull was too strong. The orphanage was on the far east side of town, a bleak and forgotten corner of the city, an old building that had seen better days, its glory long faded. The walls needed paint, the garden needed tending, but the children running through the yard seemed happy despite the neglect, their laughter echoing in the air. Emily approached through the back gate, a silent observer. She knew this place, its secrets and its rhythms. She knew the routine, she knew the times when the staff took breaks, sought fleeting moments of peace, and more importantly, she knew the director, a woman named Martha, a kind and weary soul. The same Martha who had once given food to a young Emily when she had nowhere else to turn, a lifeline in a sea of despair. Who had offered a place to sleep when the world seemed too cold, too unforgiving. Who had told her that kindness always finds its way back, that hope never truly dies. Emily waited for Martha to leave for her midday break. A moment of quiet solitude, then intercepted her in the garden, a shadow emerging from the trees. Martha, she called out softly, her voice carrying on the gentle breeze. The woman turned, her eyes widening in surprise. Emily, she exclaimed, her voice filled with warmth. Heavens, girl, it's been months since I've seen you. Are you all right? You look... I need your help, Emily interrupted, her tone urgent. It's about one of the children, the girl who doesn't speak. Sophie. Martha's face changed, her expression hardening slightly. Why do you want to know about her? She asked cautiously, her eyes narrowing. Because I found her father, Emily said, her voice steady. Martha's eyes widened even further, her hand flying to her mouth. Her father? Emily. That child appeared without documents, without a history. No one ever... I know who she is, Emily interrupted, her voice firm. "And I know who brought her here, to this place. I need proof, Martha. Anything. Documents, letters, payment records. Anything that shows who left her on this doorstep 2 years ago." Martha remained silent for a long moment, her gaze piercing and unwavering, studying Emily with eyes that had seen too much in her life, eyes that held the weight of countless stories. "You know what you're getting into?" she finally asked, her voice grave. "I know," Emily replied, her gaze unflinching. "It's dangerous, a world filled with shadows and secrets. I know you could die, facing forces beyond your understanding. I know that too." Martha sighed, the sound heavy with resignation. "Come with me," she said, her voice barely a whisper. They entered through the back gate, walking through empty corridors, their footsteps echoing in the silence. They reached a small office filled with old files, a repository of forgotten lives. Martha opened a locked drawer, the metal groaning in protest. "When the girl arrived," she said as she searched, her fingers tracing the spines of dusty folders, "there was a man with her, didn't say much, said the child had been found in the street, abandoned, that she had no family. He left a generous donation and then vanished, like a ghost in the night. Did you see his face?" Emily asked, her voice laced with anticipation. "No," Martha replied, her voice tinged with regret. "He wore a hood, concealing his features in shadow, but he left this, a hidden piece of the puzzle." She pulled an envelope from the bottom of the drawer, its edges frayed with age. Emily opened it, her hands trembling slightly. Inside there was a letter, written in elegant script, and at the bottom of the letter, a seal, a dragon coiled around a sword, a symbol of power and ancient lineage. It wasn't the royal seal, not exactly. It was different, subtly altered, but Emily recognized it from somewhere, from some recent encounter. Victor's cloak, the one he always wore, it bore the same symbol, a mark of his allegiance. "Emily," Martha said, her voice filled with concern, "what does this mean?" "It means," Emily replied slowly, her voice barely above a whisper, "that I have the proof I needed, the key to unlocking the truth." She slipped the letter into her pocket, a secret weapon against the darkness. "Where is Sophie now?" she asked, her voice regaining its strength. "In her room," Martha replied, pointing towards the hallway. "Second floor, last door on the right." Emily turned to go, her heart pounding in her chest, but Martha stopped her, gently grasping her arm. "Emily," she said, her eyes filled with a mixture of hope and fear. "Who is this child's father, really? The one she was destined to find?" Emily hesitated, weighing her options, then decided to trust, to confide in the woman who had once saved her. "The Dragon King," she whispered, the words hanging in the air. Martha's eyes widened, her face paling. "Merciful heavens," she murmured, her voice filled with awe. Emily turned and ascended the stairs, each step bringing her closer to the truth. The second-floor hallway was silent, the air thick with anticipation. Most of the children were still in the yard, their laughter fading into the distance. Only a few doors were open, their secrets hidden behind closed panels of wood. The last door on the right was closed, a barrier between her and the child she sought. Emily took a deep breath, steeling her nerves. She knocked lightly, her knuckles rapping against the wood. No answer. Only silence. She opened the door, her hand trembling slightly. The room was small and sparsely furnished, a sanctuary of simplicity. A simple bed, an old dresser, a window that overlooked the garden, a view of freedom, and sitting on the bed, a girl, dark hair, framing a delicate face, eyes that were an impossible blend of amber and green, mirroring the Dragon King's own. A golden bracelet on her left wrist, a sign of her heritage. Sophie, the lost princess. Emily entered slowly, her senses on high alert. "Hi," she said softly, her voice gentle and reassuring. "Do you remember me? I used to bring food sometimes, when you first arrived." The girl looked at her, her gaze searching and inquisitive, didn't speak, didn't utter a single word, didn't move and didn't betray any emotion. "I came," and Emily continued, her voice filled with warmth. Because I found someone. Someone who's been looking for you for a very long time. Sophie's eyes widened slightly, a spark of recognition flickering within them. Your father, Emily said, her voice barely above a whisper. The Dragon King. He's alive, and he wants to see you very much. The reaction was instantaneous, a dam breaking after years of holding back the flood. The girl who hadn't spoken in 2 years, the girl who everyone thought was mute, opened her mouth and said a single word, a beacon of hope in the darkness. Daddy. The voice was raspy, weak from disuse, but it was real, filled with a longing that resonated deep within Emily's soul. Emily felt tears welling up in her eyes, a mixture of relief and joy. Yes, she said, her voice thick with emotion. Daddy, he's waiting for you. Can I take you to him? Sophie stood up, her movements hesitant at first, walked towards Emily, her eyes fixed on her face, and took her hand, her small fingers wrapping around Emily's with surprising strength. The small hand was warm, trusting. And together they would face the darkness. A child's hand, finally seeing hope. After 2 years of darkness. Let's go, Emily said. They descended the stairs. Martha waited at the back door. Take good care of her, she said, her voice filled with concern. I will, Emily promised. They exited through the back gate, and that's when everything went wrong. A black car blocked the exit, and leaning against it, smiling that venomous smile, was Victor. Hello, Sophie, he said. His voice was smooth, dangerous. Long time no see. Sophie hid behind Emily, trembling. Victor, Emily stated, her voice firm. The human heroine, he mocked. You've caused quite a bit of trouble, you know. My men are still looking for the king in the ramble, but when one of my informants told me a woman was asking about the girl at the orphanage, he smiled, that chilling, unsettling smile. I knew exactly where to find you. Emily placed Sophie completely behind her, shielding her. Leave the girl alone, she demanded. Tired or what? Victor laughed, a harsh, unpleasant sound. Are you going to spill hot coffee in my lap again? I heard about the incident at the diner. Very amusing. You won't win, Emily declared, her voice unwavering. Oh, I haven't. Victor took a step forward, menacingly. I already have. The king is wounded, alone, weakened. The heir is right in front of me. And you? He looked at her with contempt. You're just a pathetic human who doesn't know her place. He gestured. 2 men exited the car, their faces grim and determined. Get the girl, Victor ordered, his voice sharp and commanding, and kill the woman. Emily looked around. Desperate. There was nowhere to run. There was no way to fight. There was only her, and Sophie, and the letter in her pocket, the letter that proved everything. Emily made a decision, a split-second, life-altering decision. If she was going to die, she was going to die doing the right thing. Sophie, she whispered, never taking her eyes off Victor. Remember the way to the ramble, where the old oak trees are. The girl nodded, her eyes wide with fear. When I say run, Emily continued, her voice barely audible. You run, as fast as you can. Your father's there. He'll protect you. And you? Sophie questioned, her voice small and trembling. I'll be okay, Emily lied. Desperately, Victor's men approached, closing in. Now, Emily whispered, with all the force she could muster. She lunged at the first man, throwing herself at him with reckless abandon. She had no chance. She knew it. But it gave Sophie the seconds she needed, those precious, vital seconds. The girl ran, small, fast, disappearing amongst the trees before anyone could react. Victor roared with fury, his face contorted with rage. After her, he ordered, his voice a guttural growl. Now! The men ran after Sophie, disappearing into the foliage. And Victor? Victor walked towards Emily, who lay on the ground, battered and bruised. "You ruined everything," he hissed, his face inches from hers. "No," Emily stated, even as pain shot through her entire body. "I just gave her a chance." Victor grabbed her hair. He yanked her off the ground with brutal force. "You're going to die for this," he threatened, his voice dripping with venom. Slowly, painfully, Emily smiled, a weak, defiant smile. "Maybe," she whispered, "but you're going to lose." "What are you talking about?" This time, Victor didn't smile. His expression was dark and questioning, because Emily was holding something, the letter, with his seal. And on the horizon, in the sky above the trees, something was approaching. Something huge, something that roared. Victor looked up, his eyes widening in pure, unadulterated terror. "No," he whispered, his voice laced with disbelief. "Impossible." Emily smiled wider, a triumphant, knowing smile. The Dragon King had regained his strength, and he was coming to claim what was his. The dragon was magnificent. There was no other word to describe the creature descending from the sky at that moment. Dark green scales that shimmered like living emeralds, wings that blocked out the sun, amber and green eyes that burned with an ancient fury. And when he landed, when Kyle landed, the earth shook. Victor stumbled backward, his face pale with fear. His men, the few who hadn't run after Sophie, simply fled. They didn't look back. They didn't hesitate. They just ran as if their lives depended on it. Because they did. The dragon transformed. In the blink of an eye, the gigantic creature gave way to the man, Kyle Blackthorne, the Dragon King, standing in all his glory, dressed in armor that appeared to be made of solidified scales. His eyes met Emily's first, locking onto her. "Are you all right?" he asked. His voice was soft, gentle, completely different from the fury that had burned within him seconds ago. "I am," Emily responded, her voice slightly shaky. "Sophie ran into the ramble," Emily said. "I told her to find you." Something in Cale's eyes shifted, softened. "I found her," he said. "She's safe. My guards are with her." Emily felt tears welling up. Those tears of relief and exhaustion. She didn't try to stop them. Kyle turned to Victor, his gaze hardening. The older man had stopped backing away. There was nowhere left to go. He was cornered between the king he had tried to kill and the wall of the orphanage. "Your Majesty," Victor began. The smile was still there, but it was trembling now. Pathetic. "This is a terrible misunderstanding. I was only—" "Only what?" Kyle interrupted, his voice cold as ice. "Only trying to kill the woman who saved my life? Only kidnapping my daughter for 2 years? Only assassinating my wife?" Victor went pale, his face drained of all color. "I didn't. I never." "Emily," Kyle said, never taking his eyes off Victor. "Did you find anything?" Emily held up the letter, her hand trembling slightly. "With his seal," she said. "Proof that he was the one who brought Sophie to the orphanage. Proof that he knew where she was all along." Victor looked at the letter, his eyes darting towards it. His face cycled through various expressions in seconds. Fear, anger, despair. And then, something completely unexpected. He laughed once, a bitter, defeated laugh. 20 years, he said. 20 years serving the royal family. 20 years being treated as inferior. 20 years being told I would never be good enough because I didn't have royal blood. So that's it, Kyle said. Ambition, no, Victor replied. Not just ambition, but justice. I was better than your father, better than you. But I never had a chance because I was born into the wrong family. You killed my wife, Kyle stated, his voice devoid of emotion. Victor didn't deny it. She discovered my plans, he said. She was about to tell you. I had no choice. And Sophie? Cale continued. A child. What did she do to deserve 2 years of solitude? She was just collateral, Victor stated coldly. Until I knew whether you could be manipulated, I needed leverage. But you... He looked at Kyle with something that might have been respect in another life. You never yielded. You never gave up searching. I thought time would break you. But it didn't. Because she is my daughter, Kyle stated, his voice filled with undeniable strength. Victor nodded. I know, he said. And that's why you'll never forgive me. Kyle took a step forward, his presence looming. Victor, he said. You betrayed your house. You betrayed your king. You assassinated my wife. You kidnapped my daughter. You tried to kill me. Victor didn't respond, his gaze fixed on the ground. By the laws of our kind, Kyle continued, his voice echoing with authority, the punishment for treason is death. Emily saw something flicker across Victor's face. Acceptance. And something else, and relief. Do what you have to do, he said. But know this, Your Majesty. There are others like me. Others who are tired of being treated like inferiors. Others who will continue what I started. Even if you kill me. This will not end. Kyle studied him. Perhaps not, he said finally. But it will be a beginning, he gestured. From the sky descended more dragons. Smaller than Kyle, but still impressive. Royal guards. Emily realized, clad in armor that matched the king's. Take him away, Cale ordered. He will be judged before the Council of Lords. All will know what he has done. The guards seized Victor by the arms. He did not resist. He only looked at Emily one last time. You, he said. You changed everything. An insignificant human. With no power. With nothing. And you changed everything. Emily looked back at him. Maybe, she said. That's exactly why I succeeded. Because I had nothing to lose. Victor was led away. And then, only then, did Cale allow himself to relax. He turned to Emily. The scale armor dissolved, leaving only simple clothes. He looked tired, exhausted. But his eyes shone with something Emily hadn't seen before. Peace. You did it, he said. You really did it. We did it, Emily corrected. No, Kyle said. This was you. From the moment you found me in the ramble, from the moment you decided to help a stranger, you changed everything. He stepped closer. His hand, the dragon hand with dark green scales, touched Emily's face. She did not flinch. How can I thank you? He asked. You don't have to. I need to, he insisted. You saved my life, found my daughter, exposed the traitor. You gave me back everything I had lost. Emily looked at him, into those amber and green eyes, at the scales that shimmered softly, at the man behind the king. Maybe, she said slowly, you can start by telling me your name, for real, not the title, just you. Cale smiled. It was a different smile, softer, more real. Kyle, he said, just Kyle. Pleased to meet you, Kyle, Emily said. I'm Emily, just Emily. I know who you are, he replied, and you're not just Emily. You're the most extraordinary woman I've ever met. Emily felt her face grow warm. You need to stop saying those things. Why? Because I might start to believe them. You should believe them, Cale said. Because it's true, he leaned in. And this time, when his lips met hers, it wasn't on her forehead. It was a real kiss. Soft, gentle, full of promises that Emily didn't dare believe. When they broke apart, there were tears in her eyes. not tears of sadness. Tears of something she'd forgotten existed. Hope. Daddy. The voice came from behind them. Emily and Kyle turned at the same time. Sophie stood there, in the arms of a dragon guard, the same amber and green eyes as her father, the same dark hair, the same golden bracelet that Emily had noticed at the orphanage, and she was talking. "Daddy," she said again. The voice was weak, uncertain, but real. Kyle released Emily, walked to his daughter, fell to his knees. And when Sophie jumped into his arms, when father and daughter finally reunited after 2 years, Emily saw something she would never forget. The Dragon King wept, not silently, not with shame. Tears streamed down his face as he held Sophie tightly, as he whispered apologies for taking so long, as he promised he would never let her go again. And Sophie. Sophie just repeated the same word, "Daddy, Daddy, Daddy." As if she wanted to reclaim 2 years of silence in a single moment, Emily watched from afar, feeling like she was witnessing something sacred, something private, something that had nothing to do with kings or power or politics, just a father and his daughter, finally together. Victor's trial took place 3 days later. Emily was invited, more than invited. She was practically ordered to attend. Kyle said she needed to be there, that everyone needed to know the role she had played. The great hall of Blackthorn Palace was unlike anything Emily had ever seen. Obsidian pillars that rose to a ceiling so high it disappeared into darkness. Crystal chandeliers that shone with flames that weren't ordinary fire. Tapestries that told stories of dragons since the beginning of time. And the lords, dozens of them, all in human form, but with features that revealed their true nature. Subtle scales, eyes that glowed, some with small horns like scales, others with claws that didn't quite hide. Emily felt terribly human in the midst of them, terribly small, terribly insignificant. But then Kyle entered, dressed in his royal robes, the crown of scales on his head, Sophie at his side, holding his dragon hand without any fear. And when he saw Emily in the crowd, he smiled, just for her. And suddenly, Emily no longer felt insignificant. The trial was brief. Victor denied nothing. Standing before the council, he confessed everything. The poison, Sophie's kidnapping, the murder of the Queen, 20 years of conspiracy. And when Emily was called to present the letter, when she read aloud the words that condemned Victor, the silence in the hall was absolute. "This is impossible," one of the lords said. "Victor has always been loyal. Loyalty can be feigned," Kyle replied, "but evidence does not lie. This letter, found by Emily Carter, proves that Victor knew Sophie's whereabouts all this time, that he planned my death, that he betrayed everything he swore to protect." The lords exchanged glances, and one by one, they voted guilty. Victor was taken to the dungeons. For the first time in 2 years, justice had been served, and all thanks to a waitress who didn't know her place. The celebration lasted for days. Emily didn't attend many parties. She preferred the palace gardens, where she could see the stars without the excessive glare of the chandeliers. It was there that Kyle found her on the 3rd night. "You're hiding," he said. "It wasn't a question." "I don't belong in that place," Emily replied. "I'm just a human, an unemployed waitress." "I'm not." "You're the woman who saved my life," Kyle interrupted. "The woman who found my daughter. The woman who exposed a traitor." Emily looked at him. "That doesn't change who I am." "No," Kyle agreed, "because who you are is already extraordinary." He sat down beside her on the stone bench. The garden was silent. The moon shone above them, reflecting in the scales of Kyle's face. "Sophie's been asking about you, he said, all the time. The nice lady, she calls you, the one who found me." Emily smiled, softly. "She's an amazing kid." "She is," Kyle agreed, But she's scared. The world she knew. It crumbled. Her mother's gone. Her father was presumed dead. She spent 2 years in silence, never knowing if anyone would come. Emily thought about the little girl, about the small hand, holding hers tight as they ran from that orphanage, about the first word she spoke after 2 years of silence. "Daddy, she needs time, Emily said, and love, and someone to make her feel safe." "She needs you," Kyle said, his voice barely a whisper. Emily looked up at him, her heart pounding. What do you mean?" Kyle turned to face her, fully. The moonlight illuminated his face. The scales, shimmering in the night, the amber and emerald eyes, burning with an intensity she'd never witnessed before. And something more, something vulnerable, something that kings shouldn't show. "I've never asked anything of anyone," he said, and his voice raw. "Never needed to. I'm the Dragon King. I have power, riches, an entire kingdom at my command. But none of it means anything if, Emily prompted, barely breathing, if I have no one to share it with." Emily felt her heart rate increase. "Kyle," she started. "You could have left me to die," he continued, his voice low and urgent. "You could have walked away when you found out what I was. Could have fled when Victor showed up. But you stayed every moment, never asking for anything in return. You're the first person in my entire life who's seen me as just me, not the king, not the dragon, just Kyle." Emily didn't know what to say. She was speechless, so she just listened. "I know it's insane," Kyle said, a hint of desperation in his voice. "I know we've only known each other for a few days. I know you're human and I'm something different. But Emily..." He took her hand, the dragon hand, enveloping the human one. "I don't want to let you go." Emily stared at their intertwined hands, at the dark green scales contrasting against her pale skin, at the claws that could easily harm her, but held her with such gentleness. "What are you asking?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "Stay," Kyle answered, his voice firm despite the emotion swirling in his eyes. "Stay with me. With me and Sophie, not as a servant, not as a ward, as..." He paused, his voice cracking with emotion. "As part of my family." Emily felt tears welling up in her eyes. "Again. I have nothing to offer," she said, her voice breaking. "I'm just..." "You are everything," Kyle interrupted, his grip tightening on her hand. "You are kindness when the world is cruel, courage when others flee, love when it would be easier to be indifferent. You are everything I never knew I needed." Emily looked up at him, her gaze unwavering. At the Dragon King, the powerful ruler who could command armies, at Kale, the vulnerable man who only wanted to be loved for who he was. And for the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to believe. "Yeah," she said, her voice a soft whisper of hope. It was just one word, a single syllable, but it changed everything. 6 months later, Emily stood on the same path where it all began. Central Park, the ramble, the clearing where she'd found a man tied to a towering oak tree on a stormy night. But everything was different now. The sun streamed through the leaves, casting dancing shadows on the ground. Birds sang merrily in the branches. Wildflowers carpeted the ground where before there had only been mud and blood. And Emily was no longer a waitress with nothing. She was the royal protector, a title she still struggled to grasp. The first human in history to sit on the Council of Lords. The woman the Dragon King loved more than anything in the world. "Mommy, Emily." The voice came from behind her, light and full of joy. Emily turned around, a smile already gracing her lips. Sophie was running towards her, her blue dress fluttering in the breeze, a golden bracelet shimmering on her wrist in the sunlight. And behind her, Kyle. smiling that smile that still made Emily's heart flutter. A smile meant only for her. "Did you find it?" Sophie asked, breathless as she reached Emily. Emily looked back at the tree where it had all started, the ancient oak standing tall and proud. "I did," she said softly, her voice filled with emotion. Sophie's eyes widened as she looked around the clearing, taking in every detail. "It was here," she said, her voice full of wonder. "Where you found Daddy?" "It was here," Emily confirmed, her voice thick with emotion. Kyle stepped closer, his presence a comforting weight behind her. His dragon hand found hers naturally, fitting perfectly within her grasp. As if it had always been that way. As if it always would be that way. "It looks different now," he observed, his voice low and warm. "It looks better," Emily replied. Squeezing his hand gently, she looked back at the path she had walked that stormy night, alone, fired, with nothing. And she looked at the path ahead of her now, with Kyle, with Sophie, with a family she had never dared to dream of. "You know," she said, a nostalgic smile gracing her lips. "When I was a little girl, my grandma used to tell me that the universe has a funny way of working things out, that sometimes the worst nights lead to the best mornings." "She was wise," Kyle said, his voice filled with admiration. "She was," Emily agreed, squeezing his hand tighter. "But I don't think even she could have imagined this." Sophie tugged on Emily's hand, her eyes shining with excitement. "Mommy Emily," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "Can I tell you a secret?" Emily knelt down to be at eye level with her, her heart swelling with love. "Of course, sweetie," she said, her voice soft and encouraging. Sophie leaned in close, her breath tickling Emily's ear. She whispered something in Emily's ear, a secret shared between mother and daughter, and Emily smiled, a tear rolling down her cheek. The biggest smile of her entire life. A smile that radiated pure joy and gratitude. "What did she say?" Kyle asked, his brow furrowed with curiosity. Emily stood up, her eyes shining with happiness. She looked at him, the man who had become her everything, at the man she had saved. The powerful Dragon King, reduced to nothing but ropes and a tree. At the man who had in turn saved her right back, giving her a purpose, a family, and a love she never thought possible. "She said," Emily replied, her voice thick with emotion, "that she's happy that I found you in that tree, but because now she has a mom again." Kyle pulled them both into a tight embrace, his arms wrapping around his daughter and the woman who had changed everything, father, daughter, and the woman who had healed a broken heart, and turned it into a home. There, in the clearing where it had all begun, under the same sun that now shone brightly where before there had only been storms, where there was only darkness. And Emily understood. Some stories don't begin with once upon a time. Some stories begin with a storm, with a man tied to a tree, with a choice that could have been different. A choice that could have altered everything, but it wasn't, because Emily chose to help, to be kind, to be brave. And that choice, that single choice, changed everything. You have two choices now. You can forget this story. You can close this video and continue with your life as if nothing happened. Or you can accept something. That sometimes, the darkest moments are the ones that precede the greatest light. That sometimes, the most unlikely person can change the destiny of a kingdom. And that sometimes, just sometimes, love appears exactly where we least expect it, tied to a tree, in the middle of a storm, waiting for someone brave enough to help. That night, Emily saved more than a life. She saved a family. She saved a kingdom. And she found something she had lost a long time ago, a place to belong. And as the sun set over the ramble, over the park, where it had all begun, Emily finally understood what her grandma had meant. The universe really does have a funny way of working things out. And sometimes, The worst nights really do lead to the best mornings.